Welcome to Glow State. I'm your host, Courtney Page. As a former executive recruiter, career coach, actor, and yoga teacher, I'm demystifying how people have designed the creative career and life that was meant for them, and how you can too. Now, for this week's episode, let's get glowing. Our guest today is Urmi Hossain, and Urmi has a global background. Born in Italy to Bengali parents, she now calls Montreal home, where she has built a flourishing career in finance. She has more than 6 years of work experience in the financial industry with a background in honors in finance, and she received her CFA designation in April 2023. Mm-hmm. Finance is her passion, so much so that she spends her off time teaching finance and financial empowerment to girls and women, working with organizations like FemPalette and Women in Leadership. Hello, Urmi. Nice to see you. I'm butchering your name. We had a whole conversation before this about how to say her name properly, and I'm butchering it.
It's fine. Don't worry. I'm used to it.
I know, but it's so important. But thank you so much for coming on. We connected a little bit prior to this, and I think one of the things that like immediately struck me about you is just like how warm you are. You just have a very warm energy. It seems like you're just to connect to people easily. So I'm excited for our listeners to kind of feel that warmth through their AirPods or through their car speakers or wherever they're listening to this. And another reason that I wanted to have you on is because you work in finance and you love it.
I do. I actually do. Yes.
Yeah. So the question that I usually like to lead with is if you were at a dinner party and somebody came up to you and was like, hey, what do you do? What would you say to them?
I'll probably just be very simple and be like, I work in finance. And I do like to say the word finance because I feel like there are not that many women that work in finance, or even if there are, I don't think there are as many women who say it proudly, but I am very proud that I work in finance. I just feel like we often think finance as like, we think about Wall Street basically when we think about the word finance, and we think about a bunch of like white men, but I proudly say it and I'm very like proud about it that, you know what, it's a woman working in finance and it's a not white woman. So I would just say I work in finance basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You just brought up so much amazing stuff and I want to touch on all of that. Before we do that, I want to go back a little bit to when you were a kid. What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you have any big dreams, or were you kind of just like, I'll go wherever the wind takes me?
Funny story is I had no intention of working in finance. I don't even think I knew about the word finance when I was a kid. So I think what happened is when I was much younger, I was always so much into like listening to people and like trying to understand like their mind that at some point I was like, oh, I think I want to be a therapist because I'm like, I can give like good advice. I'm good at like listening. So I would like read books about like psychology and I was so sure that I was going to become that. But then at some point I was like, no, you know what? I don't want to do this. And I was doing a program in high school, which was based in like learning languages. And I was like, I think I'm going to work like as a tourist guide in Italy because I just knew so many languages. But then I was like, you know what? I don't know where this is going to bring me. And I don't even know if I'm going to be in Italy for like the rest of my life. So then when I moved to Canada and I enrolled into university, I had international business as my major. But guess what? I so hated it. I don't even know why I went for it. And finance was my minor. So finance was my minor. And afterwards, I took a class in finance. I'm telling you, it was love at first sight. Like literally, I just enjoyed it so much that I was like, I don't want to graduate from school. So I would like enjoy going to classes. I would enjoy listening to my professors. I would enjoy studying, taking exams. It came to the point that I had to graduate. I was like, I don't want to graduate. I just enjoy this so much. And I think the reason why I like this so much is because finance is so dynamic. It's a very dynamic subject and there's always something new. And I feel like that was like very much matching with my personality, which is very dynamic.
Yeah.
So that's how like things change. Like I went from wanting to be a therapist and wanting to be like a tourist guide. And then suddenly out of nowhere, I was like, I think finance is what I want to do. So then I knew that was the right path I was going towards. And I'm finally here. I'm happy. I don't want to change. I want to stick to it.
Yeah. And so you said it was your minor, and that's kind of funny because I was an English major and then I had a political science minor just because I had been taking those classes, but I loved them. And by some point in my junior year, my advisor, Dr. Hashim, who I think I mentioned to you, he was the one that I went to Bangladesh with, and we discussed that a little bit offline, but he was like, well, you have time to major in it. Like, what are you doing? You need to major in this. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And it was just kind of because I had been taking those classes because they interested me. So I'm curious to know why were you even minoring in finance? Like, what brought you to that point?
You know what? I don't even know why I had finance as my minor. I actually do not know that. I think I just randomly chose it.
Okay.
And so I randomly chose it as my minor, and I took international business as my major because I was like, I'm probably like going to work in a very like multinational companies. That's what I thought. But then I remember thinking like, I'm just not learning anything new. I would say that with finance, there was a little bit more of work opportunities. And so then I had this, I don't know, call that I was like, no, I think I have to like major in finance. And that's how I switched it. But I don't even know why I had it as my minor. Like, I have no clue why I even chose it. I don't remember it. Like, out of all the majors, I went with like finance as my minor. I have no clue. I remember there was accounting. There was also something in my mind, but I think I used to like not like it as much because it's just, I don't know how to explain it. It's like flat. I feel like instead with finance, it's like much more fun. And I also liked marketing at some point, but I think finance was like, I knew finance was the one. Like, if when you know it,
you just knew. Yeah. So something in you knew when you chose that minor, that there was some allure about it that kind of guided you there. And you just said something really fun, that finance is fun. I don't think a lot of people would think of fun when the word finance pops up. I think people probably think like stress or like, oh my God, something more, I don't want to say negative, but maybe everybody has a different connotation with it. But why, tell everybody listening why and how finance can be. I love this.
How and why? You know what? I'm probably the only person who finds finance so interesting. Like I feel you're right. You're right. The word finance is associated with stress because we think about money. That's the first thing that comes into our mind. It is a trigger of stress because what if you don't have enough money to pay your bills? What if you don't have money to pay some expenses? And it is true, but it's also about how you shift your mindset and about seeing finance. And so I like finance and I find it really like a fun subject because there is a little bit of math, which I very much enjoy, but there is also an analytical part of it. So you're like analyzing the numbers. And what I like about it is that you have numbers, and with numbers, you can make a story out of it. Like if you see the stock price, you can make a story out of it, which is related to the company. And what I like about finance is that it's around us. We need finance. Like it's connected to economy. It's connected to corporate finance, like how companies raise money, and like everything is interconnected with finance. Because if there was no finance, there wouldn't be anything. The whole economy would collapse, and everything depends on that. Because when we think about right now with inflation, with all the monetary policies that are going well with the interest rate, like it's like basic stuff that everyone needs to know about. And so I like what I like about finance is that there is like an analytical aspect, but there is also like a quantitative aspect to it, which I feel like you can connect them and you can like build up so many things. And that's what I like. That's how I find it fun.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the professors that I had, they're so much knowledgeable that you could never get bored. Like I took so many classes. I even watched many YouTube lectures. I was never tired of listening to them. I was like, this is so interesting. Like, how can people not like it? And I know that a lot of my friends who major in other subjects, especially like accounting and marketing, they all used to hated it. But the only reason they went through those majors, it was because they were like, oh, there are job opportunities. But I think right from the beginning, you should choose really something that you enjoy, because if you're working in that field, you're going to do it for the rest of your life. And it's a pity that people go through that route that is like, I'm going to choose because there are opportunities. I think you should choose something because you're going to enjoy it eventually if you do it for the rest of your life. And so I'm glad that I found that path from the beginning with finance, and that I want to stick to it, because I think not many people can find that, honestly.
Yeah. And you touched on something really interesting, just expectations, whether it's the expectation of parents or a teacher or a coach or your friends even, or like you said, opportunities for jobs. Did you have any of those kind of external expectations placed on you from somewhere? And what were they? Where and did they come from? And how did you deal with them?
So I wouldn't say I had it from my parents. I think my parents never had an expectation on me, but I did have it with some of my relatives. I think one of the relatives was like, "Oh, why didn't you become a lawyer?" He just went straight up with that. And I think the issue is that in some cultures, especially like South Asian culture, there is this expectation that people are doctors or engineers or even lawyers.
Yeah.
So there was that expectation, but I was like, I'm not made for that. And I actually never listened to him, to be honest, because I was like, I have like zero interest when it comes to like law. So that was the only kind of expectation, that there was like a relative making a comment about it. But I never took that because I just feel like it was just from cultural pressure that it was just a cultural pressure basically. And I just wanted to go to a different route, especially because I don't think we see that many women in finance. And I didn't like, even especially back then, I didn't know many South Asian women in finance. So why not be the first one? And so that's why I stick to it basically.
Yeah. Talk more about that. I mean, that is, when I think of finance, I think of old white men and maybe some older white women, but you're young and you're South Asian and you're a woman. I mean, that would alone scare a lot of people away from it as opposed to embracing it. So where did that ambition come from and courage?
So let me tell you the story. Basically, when I was in university, I never paid attention that even in my own classroom, even in my own major, like there were not that many girls going through a finance major. And I remember like being in a class of like 60 people and probably like 45 were guys and 15 were girls. And I never paid attention to it until I was like, there are not that many girls in this class. And then when I started to work, it was not such a big deal. But then when I started to like look for more finance related job, more related to investment, that's when I started to notice that the industry is so much male dominated, because I would like go for interviews and I would like look them up on like, let's say on internet to see who's in the management team. And unfortunately, there was probably one woman or not even. And I would actually raise it in the interview process. Like I would be like, "Oh, what do you do to bring awareness when it comes to diversity, inclusivity?" I would actually bring it up because it's something important to me. And they were very honest with me. They were like, the only reason why we don't have that many women is because they're not applying for this job. So if I got the chance to get an interview, it was because I was a woman. And I think they wanted to bring that change. They wanted to have more women in their management team, whatever. But the only reason was because for some reason women did not apply for those jobs. And I think sometimes the reason being is that women do get a little bit intimidated, I would say, because I was a little bit intimidated as well. Because I was like, I don't know if I will be understood enough. What if I have something and I want to go home? Or what if I have some specific need? And sometimes I think like it would cross my mind that I was like, I don't know if they will understand me. And probably other women feel the same way. Right. And I think that's why it's one of the reasons why we don't have that many women in the industry. But I also told myself that even if we don't have that much diversity, I should still not give up on this. Like I should still like be the first one, be the pioneer of like this and be an example for other women that look, it doesn't matter. And that's the only way you can bring change, if you keep going forward, like you don't back out from these things. And so I don't even know where I was trying to go with this.
No, honestly. That's great. No, yeah, like be the change, right? Like be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah. And that just brought to mind there, and I don't remember the exact name of, there's a book around, or maybe it's just like a thought concept in self-development or in women's empowerment. But it's basically this idea that a lot of the reason that we see men in more powerful positions than women, and they have the majority, is because they ask to be there, right? And women don't necessarily always ask as much. They'll wait and to get all their ducks in a row because of whatever reasons, conditioning, social conditioning, cultural conditioning, whatever, so many reasons, but they just don't ask. And I think what you're getting at is super important, where just because you don't see someone who looks like you in a position doesn't mean that you don't belong there. It just hasn't
Exactly.
been done yet. And you just
Okay.
have to ask. And it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to get the position, because you still do need to have like all the qualifications and skills or potential, but it is worth it to ask. And I love that you asked specifically about diversity and not just about women and women of color as well. Thanks for being a pioneer in finance. I hope the people listening to this are like, oh, I can do that too. And you work a lot with different groups, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you got involved in the specific organizations that you are involved with?
Yes. So let me see, because I am involved in many of them. So there is the one that you mentioned in the introduction, which is called Pempalat. And basically it's an organization based in Czech Republic, and they just gather a bunch of mentors from all around the world. And what they do is just they pair you up with someone in like different industry or in your same industry, and who just want to have like an advice, like more like guidance when it comes to career. So that's one of the things that I do. There is another one which is called 100 Women in Finance, and this is mainly specific in finance. And it's basically like a community or an organization based in New York where basically what we do is that more experienced professionals or professionals in the finance industry, they provide guidance. We have like webinars, we have workshops, we have meetings with like young talents, especially girls who want to study and work in finance. And we basically like let's say we have like an event where we are like panelists, a panel speaker, and we just share our own experience working in finance. We provide them tips when it comes to interview. What do you need to, in order to stay in finance? And we also get to be paired up with mentees. So I am a mentor, and I do have like this young girl who's my mentee, and I like tell her like things like, oh, how you should be networking and stuff like that. And then there's a third organization called Women in Leadership. And this one is based in Canada, and we have like different chapters. And although I'm located in Montreal, I belong to another chapter where virtually it's in this organization, what we do is we try to promote as much as possible gender equality. So we have a lot of like program that women can enroll to. And these are like leadership roles. We have a blog where we provide things on like how you can excel on, let's say, networking, or how can you like leverage the power of LinkedIn. So we have like webinars, we have workshops, we have events, and that's what we try to do. Like, we just want to promote gender equality, and we want to like push women to like be in those leadership positions. So that's another one that I am a part of as well.
Yeah. And something that I know is important to you and that you like to do is just kind of self-education, right? You like reading books and listening to podcasts and doing all the things. And you mentioned webinars, and there are so many free resources for people. Like so many. And you can learn so much. If someone's like interested in getting more educated in finance, what is a great way for them to kind of start?
So when it comes to finance, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. That's one thing that I do. There are different podcasts that you can listen to where like some of them are more related to the economy, and some others are tailored more towards personal finance. And I really like the one about personal finance, because this one that I listen to, she's called More Money Podcast. And she's a Canadian woman who basically invites all these people from different parts of the industry, and she talks about things related to personal finance. And I really like that, because I think no one at school teaches you personal finance, and then you become an adult and you're like, okay, I don't know how to deal with these things.
Exactly.
And I really like that, because she talks about like, how do you get rid of debt? How do you budget? How do you save? She talks about like, she talks about insurance, tax planning. So she's very good. That's one of the ones that I listen to. And I think it's pretty good for any beginners who want to start with finance. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she does give like workshop of webinars or something like that. She also has a book. No, she hasn't published it yet, but she's working on a book as well. And then there's this other YouTube channel that I follow, which I really enjoy. And she's called Rose Han. And basically what she does is, again, she provides books recommendation. She talks about how do you invest in the market? How do you like invest in stocks? How do you invest in like bonds? She also, you can buy courses from her. And I know her personally. She's really good, because I watch a lot of her stuff, and she does great advice. So she's also really good. And then when it comes to like, if someone wants to like learn by themselves. There are a couple of books that I very much enjoyed. There's this book which is very popular. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know if you have heard about it.
That's a classic.
That's a classic. Exactly.
Yeah.
I highly recommend this book. And if you want to go more into, let's say, investing or like stock analysis, there is this other book called, oh my gosh, I think it's called The Little Book of Valuation or something like that, which is written by Asvat Damodaran. And he is a professor at NYU, and I'm telling you, he's the best professor in the world, because he just tells you how he gives companies stocks valuation. And he also has a YouTube channel. Honestly, if you can watch his stuff, it's so valuable because he tells you about what's happening in the economy. He gives you his point of view about different companies, and you can learn so much from him. And his YouTube channel is free. And I highly recommend watching his stuff for anyone
who's
who's
name
trying
again?
to. Aspat Damodaran. That's his YouTube channel.
We'll include all of this in the show notes for people. Yeah. And that's amazing. So yeah, there's so much just free information that people aren't aware of from these very credentialed professionals that have spent their lives in finance. I think one of the reasons that is so important to have financial education for women is because it really allows for financial freedom, which then really affects their entire life. You can get out of a stuck situation, whatever that is. So I'm wondering if you have any other kind of reasons that finance for women is so important and should be very focused on.
Yeah. I think the one that you said, financial freedom, is definitely most important one. Financial independence, of course. Yeah. I feel like no matter what your relationship status is, you always need financial independence. And I think not just financial independence, but just independence on your own. You don't want to depend on other people for anything in life, especially when it comes to money. And also the other reason is options. I feel like when you are financially independent, or when you know how to manage your money, you have options in your life. Whether you want to take courses, whether you want to travel, it just gives you the freedom to choose and do many different things. And it's only you who can decide. So that's why I think it's very important, because I've seen it, especially from the South Asian perspective, is that a lot of the women, unfortunately, they just depend so much on their husbands that if something happens to their partners, they have no clue about the bank account information, what's the PIN. They don't know if there is an insurance. There are things involved, and they're so much not aware of it. And it's in this moment that you need to step up and be like, okay, I have to be the man at home and I have to be able to handle this. And so that's why it's very important. And there are stories that I've seen of people that I know who are South Asian, their husbands passed away and they have no clue of anything. So how do you move forward? And so that's why I think it's important for freedom, independency, and because it gives you several options of what you want to do with your life, whether it's travel, taking courses, anything that you want to do, basically.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I have a picture of my daughter right there, and she's such a firecracker. And one of the reasons, just as you're talking about all of that, I think our generation, if we can kind of start to break that, I know in South Asia, it's prominent. And I still think it's prominent in North America, maybe not as much, but it still can be. But to be able to kind of break that tradition, if you will, so that my daughter, and if you ever have a daughter or nieces and all of that, don't even have to, that's not even a thought when they're growing up. It's just, I need to be able to be financially independent because I'm a person in the world, right? And just kind of creating a new mindset towards it. Being again, just going back to that whole being that change that you want to see. And the other thing that I think you are the person to talk to about this is personal branding, which has nothing to do with finance. But one of the things that really I found so interesting about you was oh, I work in finance and I love it, but I'm also super entrepreneurial. You clearly do a lot of work outside of the office with causes that we talked about that you're very passionate about. Okay, you aren't this massive celebrity that everybody knows, which is really cool, but you had this great personal brand, right? And so I want just to know how that has been beneficial for you, even in a corporate setting, and what kind of brought you to that realization that creating this kind of personal brand within a corporate setting is going to be beneficial.
So here's the thing. I didn't know I was doing personal branding until I realized after a couple of years that I was actually doing it. So
I love that.
It just happened like that. Literally, it just happened like that because like if you Google me a couple of years ago, you would have found nothing about me, not even a single information. But now I feel like there's a lot of about me just if you Google me. And I think what happened is it just happened like me just following my like curiosity. It started from my blog, I would say. And I was like, I have so much information that I want to share to the world, but I don't know what means to use. So I started with the blog. And I remember with the blog, I wasn't so comfortable because I was like, I have to tell the world who I am. I probably have to share a story because that's how you have people connected to you. So I started with the blog, and initially, even though I was a little bit uncomfortable, I was like, no, I need to, like, if I want people to like me and to relate to me, I have to tell a story. So this is how I came up with like sharing a little bit about myself, putting my pictures, and then I started to share knowledge. But then afterwards, what happened is I was invited to one of my friends' YouTube channel, and we spoke about the CFA, we spoke about finance. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I think I enjoy like speaking like on a YouTube channel. So then later on, I just went and created a YouTube channel. And after that, I was like, I do want to like write a book. And that's how I came with my book. And after that, I don't know what happened. It was sort of like a chain. I was just started to get invited to like to different podcast shows, to different YouTube channels to talk about my story. And without realizing, I had a brand. So I would say like everyone has everyone has personal branding, I think. And I think it's all about like cultivating it and finding what your brand is and trying to see like, what do I want to talk about? How do I want to promote myself? So I feel like when you think about me, there are some words associated like woman working in finance, South Asian working in finance. And so I've been like unconsciously working on my personal branding part. And I feel like unconsciously I develop a very entrepreneurial mindset as well, because everyone that I meet, they all think I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm like, no, I'm not. But I just like to have this creative side of me where I just want to like create things. I like creating these things and having it out there because I feel a very like a sense of accomplishment, I would say. Like I remember I wrote my book and I was like, I can tell the world I'm a self-published author. And everything has been great. I have to tell you the truth because I get contacted by people on LinkedIn to like do collaborations, which I never thought in my whole life that I would have been contacted, but I do get contacted to like do collaborations, to be interviewed for like a podcast, to be interviewed in magazine. And it just opened up so much opportunities because I feel like I'm very much like exposed there, but people know what I can bring and how valuable I can be. So I appreciate also a lot that I get people connecting with me because they just want to have an advice on like, oh, I want to work for this company. Can you tell me what to do? Or I have like women asking me, they're like, I want to switch in finance. What do you think I should do? So it has been beneficial, honestly, because I feel like people know who you are, but it just also creates a sense of like respect from other people because they know that you can bring so much out of it. So that's how it all happened.
That's so cool. No, and I think what I'm hearing is just that you were following something that you were just genuinely interested in. And by doing that, all of these kind of doors started to open and it was almost like a snowball, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of kept gaining momentum and getting bigger and bigger. And I think that can happen when you start to go down that path where like, oh, this is really interesting to me. Let me discover this a little bit more. Let me follow that a little bit more. And that is such a great way to like dip your toe into something just to see if you like it. And then if you do, like go a little bit more. And I think a lot of people, when like the term like personal branding is very kind of daunting and like celebrities, like that's kind of what comes to mind. But you don't have to be like Justin Bieber to cultivate a personal brand. And it can be super beneficial. And it doesn't have to be this very like salesy kind of skeezy thing. It's it should feel authentic and genuine
Yeah.
to your interest, right?
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And I love that you were doing it while you were also holding a steady job, because I think that's
Mhm.
another kind of misconception that, oh, I have this like entrepreneurial fire. And if anyone is listening and they definitely know that, I think you kind of can tell pretty easily. Like if you've ever thought of running your own business, you probably have like thought of that. But there's this misconception that in order to pursue that entrepreneurial venture, you have to either quit your day job or not go after the venture, right? It's like black or white. And what you're proving day in and day out is that you can do both and have the stability and also have that creative outlet. So can you just speak to that a little bit? I mean, was that
Yeah.
something that was I mean, I know you said it kind of just started to gain momentum, but yeah, can you just speak to that a little bit?
So for me, what happened is, so I know there are people who are just like, they like their 9 to 5 job, which there is nothing wrong with it, but I don't
Of course,
like
no,
that.
yeah.
It's like very, I don't know how to explain it. It's just very monotonous. I think if you want to like spice it up, you have to like follow your passions. And that's what I've been doing. I've been following my passion, but I also been trying to like learn and see what am I capable of. So I wanted to cultivate that and tap some potentials. And then what happened is I was like, you know what? Yes, I work in a stable job and you don't need to do anything else because you have a stable job. But at the same time, I feel like when it comes to personal branding, you have to think it this way. It's sort of like your insurance, I think. Because if you ever lose your job and you're looking for another job, what's going to happen is that people will look you up. That's the first thing people do. Will outstalk other people, especially especially when an employer is looking for someone. And I think like if you did enough personal branding, I think it just shows like what additional value you can bring for a potential like job. And that's how I like to see it. I think personal branding is it's sort of like an insurance. And I think everyone should really work on it. And it doesn't have to be anything like massive, write a book. It doesn't have to be like that. It's literally like just follow your passions. Like if you're someone who's like passionate about cooking, why not write a cooking book? And I'm pretty sure it can come easily. Why not blog about it? I think it just adds so much value. And I think sometimes the problem is that especially when you're looking for a job, the issue is that we tend to perform a role, which is the role of the ideal candidate. We're trying to like memorize some script, memorize what the company does, tell them about our skills, our education. But I think sometimes you have to bring that additional thing. And I think being authentic and showing that you have these other additional things that comes with your personal brand, I think it's just so much more valuable. So that's, I would say, how I went through it.
Yeah.
That's how I came with it. And you're right. I'm like an employee entrepreneur or something like that. Basically.
Yeah. An employee, an entrepreneurial employee entrepreneur. Yeah. And I think it also brings this sense of commitment to the industry, right? Because if you were to go out for a job interview in finance, it's not like you have this side thing going on in like, I don't know, engineering or something. It's all finance related. So that alone is like a whole huge part of your resume, if you will, right? So it brings commitment and also credibility because you have all these people you're on my podcast, you're going on other podcasts, you have a book, you have all this stuff that automatically creates a sense of credibility that is absolutely going to be super attractive to employers, right?
Yeah, because it shows this other aspect of your personality they wouldn't show just by saying if you do like you just go through a bunch of companies. I feel like it just shows that you have determination and that you have perseverance and that you are a hardworking person. Because especially when it comes to like these things such as, creating books, ebooks, or, having a blog, these are things that take a lot of time, actually. Like I remember I struggle a lot with YouTube and stuff like that. It takes a lot of time, but it also shows that you're like resilient and you're tenacious enough. You're not going to give up. So I think it just adds a little bit, like it shows that you're creative. It shows that you're a very hardworking person. So why not bring them at the table when you're going for an interview?
Yeah. And I think you touched on two things. So one is that it's hard. And because I think there's this sense of like, oh, well, anybody can have a YouTube channel, right? It's there. You can sign up for it. But it's hard. Like it's hard to create the content and to produce it and to, it's not just this easy thing to put out there. So if anyone's listening thinking like, oh, well, that's great for her. It's like, no, it was a lot of work, right? And you clearly have an incredible work ethic. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that having this side entrepreneurial venture going on allows you to tap into potential that if you weren't to have it, if you were not to have it, and you just kind of stayed in your 9 to 5, even if you really enjoyed it, it would take a lot longer for, like, you're basically depending on somebody else to recognize the potential, ask you to show it. And they're kind of, a lot of your agency kind of gets taken away and it can take a lot longer. And I think that's where a lot of unhappiness and that monotonous feeling that you were talking about starts to happen. So by having this kind of side thing, even if it's like you said, like just start very small and just do what interests you, you're going to find skills that you didn't even know you had that you might be really good at. It might be one of your best skills that just wasn't being used in the cubicle, right? It just allows for so much self-exploration within like the framework of your industry, whatever that is. So I don't know. It's just like food for thought for people. If don't wait on somebody else to, goes back to that, like just ask your boss for if there's diversity, what's the measure? Like, how are you incorporating that? And ask yourself, like, what is my potential? What can I do to kind of tap into it? Okay. I have had so much fun with you. I have a little bit of like a rapid fire kind of, it doesn't have to be fast. I know. She's like, please send me everything beforehand. She came so prepared, but I like this ready. Because you can take as much time as you want. It doesn't have to be rapid fire, but
Okay.
What advice would you give your younger self, and at what age would you have given that advice?
Oh my gosh, what age? Not what age. Probably don't be afraid of asking or speaking up for the things that I wanted. And I would say the age is 14, maybe.
14. Good. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a tough age. What is the best career advice you've ever been given?
Choose the job that will get closer to your true self.
Who told you? Who gave you that advice?
One of my closest friends.
Oh, that's nice. What's your favorite quote?
Be the change you want to see in the world by Gandhi.
Yes.
I like that
We talked a lot about that today. You clearly live that quote every day, which is great. What is the single best daily practice that you have in your life right now, and why, if you have one?
So it's not a daily practice. It's more like a weekly practice.
Okay.
I like to do boxing, and I very much enjoy boxing. It's like my happy place.
Why?
I don't know. It's just, there is a fighter that I have inside of me that comes out when I'm in the boxing gym. And I just like that. I really enjoy that. I feel like I can release so much of the stress and negativity, but it puts me into that like fighting mode that I can do anything that I want in the world. Ooh. So I very much enjoy boxing. Yes.
You're like the second boxing person that I've had in the last 2 weeks. I was actually listening to a podcast and that randomly came up. I was talking to somebody and they were like, you should try boxing. I was
That's so good. That's so
yeah.
Good.
Oh my God. I'm gonna like look into it. Okay, cool. So and that actually is great. It ties into my next question. So what is your go-to pump up song?
Okay. I'm the most boring person when it comes to songs, but I never know what to listen to. And so I just listen to a bunch of podcasts. Like I just put a podcast episode and that's what I listen to. So there's not even a song because I never know what to put. Literally, I never know what to put. I do like to listen to Britney Spears a lot because she's my idol.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
So there you go. Britney Spears. There you go.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What's the song? That like 1, 2, 3, that song? Such a
whole everything from her career, like Hit Me Baby One More Time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All of them because she's the best.
That's amazing. Oh my, that is like the best answer ever. I love that. Go Britney. No, it's funny because I also like the poppier, the more bubblegum, like the better. I love it. I love it. I actually teach a yoga class called Pop Vinyasa. and it's all pop music as opposed to like, the super calming, like what people go to yoga for. And I'm like, no, we're going to do pop vinyasa and we're going to have so much fun. And that's what this class is. Urmi, thank you so much. This was amazing. We're going to include all of your contact, anything about you in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to Urmi for any kind of financial advice. I hope to have you back on someday. Like, you're so fun to talk to. You're so easy to talk to and so interesting and smart. So thank you so much, and have a good one. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Glow State. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show, and then be sure to share it with a friend you know who would love a little glow in their life. I'll see you next time. Now, go glow.